Well, I think what's going on is a natural correction from the strong outperformance that we saw in technology in August. We saw significant buybacks from technology in the month of August. And you're just not going to get those buybacks from the technology sector ahead of earnings in the next couple of weeks. I think it's warranted to pare back holdings in technology right now. When you look at beta and you think about technology, it is the highest exposed to the S&P, obviously. That's something that was held by financials in years past. So the exposure is there for technology. And I think all things being considered, I wouldn't call it a technology correction. I think there's more dispersion. There's a lot of names working in technology. But
the best ones are the ones that are down.
Well, the FANGs are the ones that are down.
If it's now, anytime there's a little bit of turbulence or volatility or concerns about trade and people flee the market, this becomes the number one ATM to go to.
Absolutely. I would agree with that. But there are other names like a Salesforce, like an Adobe that have recently just made all-time highs. And again, I think it's more about dispersion. I don't think right now, and it can change, but I don't think you read into the weakness in technology and say, okay, the overall market is rolling over.
Yeah. Steve, I mean, you have had, this change of leadership in a fairly significant way month to date, right? The economy's good, the data's good, data one after the other keeps coming in and surprising to the upside, and yet these cyclical names are the ones that are lower, replaced by these more defensive names. Why is that?
I think there's a few things going on here. First of all, I agree with Joe that you want to take some exposure off. I sold Tableau data, got out of the rest of it. Stock's more than doubled, so it was pretty good. I still think it looks okay, but why take the risk? I'm looking to cut, so I'd rather keep the core positions. Here's why what's happening is happening. Number one, not to blame them, but it's true, the algo traders are driving a lot of the activity that we see. And I think the activity there, as a percentage of the overall market action, is greater than even the most aggressive estimates. So when you take a look at what happens to BABA, when you take a look at what happens with Apple, plus the political overtones that are headwinds now for Apple and for Google and for Facebook, it brings down the whole sector. So there's a search for leadership that's under the radar. And that's some defensive names that have been working. Those defensive names are more levered, arguably, to the consumer, and the consumer strength is just at record levels.
Yeah, but you do have,
I think it's an offensive play as well as a defensive play.
Month to date, discretionary is down.
Right.
It's the second worst group next to tech. You do have some businesses that play right into the consumer game. Office Depot talking about the negative effects, Jim, of tariffs. Discretionary was one of the better groups.
Well, look, but I think everybody here is saying that these are groups that have had very good runs. Joe, you were certainly pointing that out. So maybe it's just a pause that refreshes. I think, though, that there is a reason to at least examine the downside. And one of the things that I would look at is how international markets have totally diverged from the U.S. markets. Now, a lot of this has to do with the dollar. A lot of it has to do with trade policies or trade issues that are going on. But as you see this remarkable divergence between international market performances and the S&P 500, one has to ask the question, how do they come back? Do international markets come up, or does the S&P 500 come down? And the answer to that, Scott, I think is really simple. We're in the second half of the last month of the quarter. People are going to look to earnings, the third quarter earnings report. You should get a little snapshot over the last couple of weeks to see if anybody pre-announces. And frankly, you haven't seen much in the way of pre-announcements. You'll get Micron reporting earnings later this week. That will be a good insight into the chip sector, which has been a little bit of a battleground, both in terms of how technology has been doing, but also in terms of will the U.S. market continue to go higher or will it come down to meet the international markets? Frankly, I think earnings are intact and you're going to see a rise from here. But it's a question that's worth asking. Yes.